Hey, I'm Randy, and you're watching The Cheap Audio Man. Here at The Cheap Audio Man, we help folks find high-value, hi-fi home theater and headphone gear. And today, we're talking about which component you should upgrade first. You know, speakers, amps, DACs, turntable sources. The answer may surprise you. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk about which component you should upgrade first. Today's sponsor is the Weem Mini Streamer. Whether you want to build a whole home distributed audio system or just dip your toe into streaming, the Weem Mini has you covered. With Apple AirPlay 2, Bluetooth, Tidal Connect, Spotify Connect, and a free customized application to bring in your own network music, as well as every major streaming platform. The Weem Mini Streamer is available from Amazon and the Weem website. Links are in the description and the pinned comment. So I get this question a lot, either through the comments or private messages or emails, and that's, what component should I upgrade? What should I start with? And the first thing I would say is, if you don't know what you're looking for, if you don't know what you're missing, or you're enjoying the music as is, I'd stick with your system. Because in this hobby, ignorance is bliss. And if you don't know that you want something else, or if you don't know there's something wrong with your system, don't go looking for it, because it could be a rabbit hole that is difficult to climb out of. Speakers. The overwhelming thought process, and I hear it often, and I believe it to a certain extent, is that speakers can make the biggest difference in a system. And the speakers are really the last thing before the music comes out of your system and hits your eardrums. So obviously we would want good speakers. The differences that a speaker makes in your system is really due to their voicing. It has something to do with the drivers and how clear the drivers are, maybe crossover components and things like that. But really it comes down to the voicing of the speaker. When I say the voicing of the speaker, I mean, is the speaker warm, which means maybe doesn't have a lot of emphasis on the treble? Is the speaker neutral, which means it's, well, neutral? Is the speaker lively or emphasized in the treble? Depending upon how the speaker is voiced is how you are going to hear the music coming out of your system. Because the speaker is like a giant filter. If it's blue, it doesn't matter what's going through it, everything's going to come out blue. So if a speaker is really lively on top, everything coming out of your system is going to sound lively on top. And a lot of times when people initially hear a speaker, if there is an emphasis in the treble region, one gets the impression that that speaker has more detail. And that's not always the case. A speaker that's emphasized in the treble can give the impression of detail. So it comes off as being detailed, but it's not really detailed, because one could get the same sound if they used, well, tone controls or an EQ, depending again on the speaker. I know I'm painting with pretty broad strokes here. The other thing to consider in a speaker is the drivers. Some drivers just sound clearer or can reproduce more detail. If you're hearing more detail out of a new pair of speakers, it could be because, well, they have better drivers. What the speakers are really doing is just translating what the source and the amp are giving it. So while a speaker can make a big difference in the sound of a system, it's not necessarily because they are giving you more detail. That detail was always there. The speaker is just now serving it up to you. But if you already like the sound of your system, already like the sound of your speakers, then I would stick with them. Amplifiers. So sonically, amplifiers to me have similar sound characteristics as speakers. Some amplifiers can be smooth or not as emphasized on the top end. Examples would be the Denon PMA 600NE or the Cambridge AXA 25 or 35. Those amplifiers are just warmer, gives a warmer presentation. Then there are neutral amplifiers. There's also amplifiers that give an emphasis on the bass and on the treble. That's a V-shaped or a U-shaped amplifier. Speakers do the same thing. Then there are amplifiers that may have emphasis on the top end and maybe even feel anemic on the bottom end. So thin, as I like to call them. The differences that I see with amplifiers is that as I've gotten a better amplifier, and I'm not saying more expensive, just a better amplifier, I've noticed that the experience of the music starts to change. I start to hear different instruments being placed in different areas. So the sound staging and the imaging start to improve with different amplifiers that I've heard. And one of the things that a lot of those amplifiers have in common, the ones that do really good job of sound staging and imaging, is that they have really good power supplies, or better power supplies than some of the other amplifiers. Now, I don't know if that is causing the increase in soundstage and imaging, but I do think it's contributing to it. There's other aspects of an amplifier as far as parts, capacitors, transistors, all that good stuff, amp modules if it's a Class D amplifier. But the difference I really hear in an amplifier beyond the sound characteristics is the ability to soundstage and image. And as with speakers, if an amplifier is emphasized in the treble region, it can give off the impression of being more detailed in comparison to other amps. But it's not really detailed. It's just emphasized again in that region. Sources. So I don't think, and I didn't give sources enough credit in the past. If you take a picture with your cell phone, go out and take a picture, and then you zoom all the way in, as far in as you can, you'll see that whatever you zoomed into is going to be pixelated and not detailed. Now, if you get a camera that has a ton of megapixels and you take the same picture in the same area, you can now zoom way into that picture and still have good detail, good resolution. And I think that's a good analogy for a source. If one has a good source, that's where the true detail is coming from. Now, one is only going to get the detail from a source if the source material is detailed. So it has a lot to do with the recording as well. But if a source has the ability to resolve, that's where the real changes start to take place with realism, detail, dynamics. It starts at the source. If you have a great source, but it's going through an amplifier that maybe is emphasized in the wrong region and then going into speakers that are a bit veiled or muddled, it doesn't matter. But the thing with sources, as in many other things, garbage in, garbage out. So if your source isn't good, it doesn't matter how good your amplifier is or how good your speakers are, they're not going to reproduce all the detail because the detail is just not there. It's like that cell phone picture. From far away, it looks pretty good, but the closer you get into it, the worse it looks. It was really a couple of components that made the light bulb go off for me about how important sources are. And that was the Ortofon 2M Blue cartridge, and that was going through the iFi Zen Phono, which has to do with, again, the amplification part of it. But it was the Ortofon 2M Blue, and it was the Denafreps Aries 2. And the thing that I noticed about both of those components is that regardless of what amplifier I put them on, regardless of what speakers I had those running through, it improved the sound on everything. And even speakers or amplifiers that I thought maybe were too thin or too bright or too forward came in line a little bit. So the takeaway for me was that sources are way more important than I gave them credit for. With a good or better source, I think that's when you hear the real detail. You're starting to get that base level of information, which then you can pass into the amplifier and therefore into your speakers. But the appearance and impression of detail from amplifiers or speakers is not true detail. I think true detail comes from the source first. So unfortunately, the answer to the question, which component should I upgrade first, is complicated. And it's complicated and personal to you depending upon what you're looking for out of your system. I do think that speakers can have a big impact on the system, but that impact is due to their voicing and not necessarily how much better the music is. So what I hear from a speaker is the tonal characteristics. Is it V-shaped? Is it warm? Is it overtly bright? The thing about a speaker, though, is that you can tailor that with tone controls, loudness buttons, or EQ. So if you can get two speakers to sound pretty similar, then what you're really hearing is just the flavor of the speaker. And that may be good, that may be great, and if it is, awesome. Don't worry about continuing to upgrade the system. The other important thing that I've learned in this hobby is that synergy is important. Every component supports another component. And you can start stacking either good things on top of each other or bad things on top of each other. So if a source soundstages and images well, and the amplifier soundstages and images well, and the speaker soundstages and images well, well then you're probably going to get a pretty good soundstaging and imaging experience. However, if a speaker is overly focused in the treble region, and a DAC is overly focused in the treble region, and the amp is overly focused in the treble region, well then it's going to be a pretty intense experience unless that is exactly what you're after. But you can also cancel out the really good characteristics of a component by not having a good synergy. An amplifier may be able to resolve a lot of detail or pass through a lot of detail, but the speaker may be muddled, and what you would get is just kind of a cancelization. You're just going to get a mediocre sound experience instead of building upon one component to the next. So if you get it wrong, you can kind of actually cancel out the good things of a component. If you get it right though, you can have an exponential improvement in your musical experience. If you're after true resolution, true detail, I would start with the source first. If you're looking for just a different sonic characteristic of your system, I start with the speakers first. But really, I would start with some tone controls, moving speakers around a little bit, or just buying an EQ. Because I think a lot of people would be surprised just how different you can get your system sounding with tone controls, speaker placement, or an EQ. Maybe the loudness button. Loudness button makes everything. Loudness button is like bacon and butter. You really can't have too much of either, like the loudness button. Regardless of where you start in improving your system, and I'm not saying you have to improve your system at all. If you enjoy it, stick with it. Put your money towards more music. Put your money towards going to a concert, buying some t-shirts, whatever it is. You don't need to upgrade your system. But if you are wanting to go down that rabbit hole and explore that adventure, with mindful choices, you can get something at really any budget that can be extraordinary. But you have to be patient, and you have to be willing to dig through that DVD pile, the box of DVDs, like $2 DVDs. You got to dig through it before you find a good one. But once you do, it can be really incredible. And one of the funnest parts of this hobby is actually the journey, looking, finding, combining different components to get exactly what it is that you want, because there is no right answer about how something should sound. Ultimately, that's up to you. If you like the sound of tubes, awesome. If you like the sound of speakers that don't have a crossover, awesome. It doesn't matter. It's about what you like. And throwing money at stuff doesn't always just make it better. If you think I missed anything, just go ahead and pop it down in the comments so other people can read it and learn. But if you want to support the channel, you can sign up for Patreon. Patreon.com/CheapAudioMan. Every Sunday night, we have Patreon-only Zooms. We also have a Patreon-only Facebook group. You can also sign up for Amazon Music or Tidal. There's a link in the description. Click on the link, sign up. You get a few months for free. You can also try out Roon for free right now. You can also use the links in the description. Most of those links are affiliate links. If you click and you buy through those links, I will get a commission, but it doesn't cost you any more, so it's a great way to support the channel. So, don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu. If you're looking to upgrade your system, do some research. Try to find the best combination for you. Listen to it and fill your soul with happiness. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.